if you look at the virtues and the ethics of Greeks and Romans versus, the world after Christ, here's an example is like the Romans would never put up a statue to a martyr. They wouldn't put up a statue to some poor peasant killed by an incompetent soldier.
Yeah.
They would put up a statue to a god or a conqueror or someone of that stature. Whereas now, to use a controversial example, it's like, look at George Floyd. He's killed. We see murals painted of this man. He's elevated to the status of a saint. And while his death is tragic, it's like in Rome, you would never see a statue to some fallen peasant in the hinterlands.
Well, it's the elevate. I'm glad you're talking about this, because this is, to me, one of the odder things that goes on in our society is the elevation of the victim.
That's right. So that is the core Christian concept that is just so pervasive, and Nietzsche picked up on that. And in his terms, he characterized these things as like the slave morality versus the noble.
Yeah. And I understand the value of it in terms of somebody who sacrifices himself, for the good of the community, right? You're sacrificing yourself in order so that others may live and, what have you. But at the same time, where people are aiming to take up the mantle of the victim in order to, like, it just doesn't seem like attempting to be a victim is a good thing, right? Like,
there's an intensification of the victim status as almost a higher form of life. We do see competition, especially because the state hands out goodies based on it. But it's like people competing to prove that they're a bigger victim than others in order to receive some benefit of some kind, or just get more attention in the public sphere. I think that's an outgrowth of this. But what seems to be missing is the Christian sense of forgiveness. That's not part of this. And then the
victimhood and the vengeance going together, right? It's like, Christ was all forgiving, and and he got
if you don't honor this victim, you should be a victim. I don't. That next step is.
The next step behind this is like the whole "let's go burn down a city" thing is probably not the natural evolution of it. You've got to. Right.
And I don't know. It's interesting. Like, why? So Nietzsche famously announced in the 19th century that God was dead, right?
We do not have enough blood in the world to wash our hands, or something to that effect.
Yes, precisely. Yes. Yeah, I think that's it. And so what happens after that? Well, in a Christian world, what happens is the star dies, but the light carries on for a number of years. And so there are all these practices and ways of interacting and beliefs that have the vestiges of Christian morality, but they have nothing to base it on. And I feel like in the 19th century, we saw in Russia, for instance, the nihilists movement. And if you thought God was dead and you were an atheist, it's like, I get you could transition into nihilism. More probably you move to hedonism, where it's some kind of live for the moment. What's odd, I think, in Europe and in America is that when God dies and you retain the vestiges of Christian morality, instead you move to communism. And so communist Russia became this intensified version of glorifying the victim and killing and destroying anyone who didn't agree. But then I think woke and some of these other things could be characterized the same way, in the sense of that, again, it's the focus on some kind of victim, but it has this like tenacious punishing quality to it, which stands in contrast to, I think, Chinese communism. So they don't have the legacy of Christianity. And so maybe this could be why Chinese communism is different from Soviet communism or other examples, because they're not grappling with the legacy of Christian morality. They're just, it's more Confucian and collectivist to begin with. So maybe in that sense, it could be more fascist in orientation. But it does seem to be a different animal than the Soviets.